Today I have Cara and Alex from Strata Life WA to talk to us about frustrations that property managers have with strata managers. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to start off by saying, because I don't think I've actually told you this in person, you guys have stood out to me from a strata management point of view for 3 reasons. And the first reason was your email about educating the complex up at Joondalup with the apps and holding that night where for 30 minutes you would help people, use the app, because I think you put in the email that you understand that sometimes you just need someone next to you to help you do the app. Yep. So well done for that, because that was a massive standout for me. The second thing was the emails. So I remember, Alex, you told me at the start, can you please email through admin? And then I forgot and I emailed Alex and not admin. But you turned around and when you just said, don't forget next time to go to admin. And you said it nicely with this sort of a bit of humour, a bit of personality. And I sort of went, I forgot, sorry, I'll make sure I do it. That, I know it might sound like nothing to you, but that was very, very welcomed. And I'm going to give you a story about someone who ticked me off the other day. And because your good emails are coming through at the same time this other strata manager is dealing with me, it's just making you guys stand out and glow. And then the third thing was the advising of maintenance. So again, like when there was a lift issue, and you guys were very good with your email in that you said, this is the problem, this is when we're having it fixed. If they can't fix it on site, this is the next plan. So we all knew exactly what was happening. Again, you might just think that's normal.
It's the little things, isn't it?
But it's just things, not normal.
Yeah.
And I'm going to share a quick story about a strata manager I dealt with recently, and it just frustrated me. So what happened was I advised him that we've got new tenants moving in, and I filled out first of all, he didn't ask me to fill out the form, so I sent him through. Then he said, no, you need to fill out the form. That's cool, because you probably should have asked me that the first time. So I fill out the form. So I had 4 tenants. So I PDF him the forms, but in one document, about 4 there. And he turned around and he said, great start, but I really need them in 4 separate PDF attachments. Can you please redo? And I was nearly going to say something, and then my staff are going, Ash, let it go. And
so now you just say something on the podcast.
So now I'll just say something.
Put it out
That's
publicly.
Right. Just because I need to get that venting out, because it annoyed me from the point of view that, like, maybe he was right. Maybe I should have done it in 4 PDFs. But then I thought, couldn't you just split it or print it anyway?
I'd say in the time it took to send the email, it could have been split into 4 PDFs.
That's
probably doesn't know how to.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
possibly. So they were frustrations that we've got, and so that's why I've got you guys in, because I really, really, really do love your work. So they're just a few examples. Now, I just want to disclose, I guess, to everyone that, like property managers, we've got good property managers and bad property managers. Same with strata, we've got good ones and bad ones, probably not the right choice of words, but we've got good ones and bad ones. But where I think the frustrations fall with property managers versus strata managers is that the expectations are not aligned. So in property management, I think we're very naive to what you guys do and your job roles, and I don't think anyone's really educated either party on what the job is. You guys, strata managers possibly, I don't know if this is true or not, but strata managers possibly have come from a property management background, or not really? Where would strata managers come from?
In some cases, I mean, to be honest, it's a very small industry, obviously, compared to property management. It's tiny. A lot of people in it have been in it for a really long time. And may have come, got involved back when it was a completely different beast. You had bookkeepers and accountants getting into strata management because it was really just a very secretarial bookkeeping kind of role when we were talking, small little 4-villa schemes where it's just a common driveway and a bit of garden. So, and that sort of, there's still a lot of those people that have been in the industry for, 20, 30 years, still big parts of the industry today. And in terms of, the new people coming in, which is at a pretty slow rate, really, all sorts of backgrounds. Usually they'll come in with an administrative background and sort of get trained up into strata management. So that could be an administrative background in any sort of area. I wouldn't say that property managers are a high percentage of what comes in. There's certainly, it's an element of it, but I wouldn't say that they, you know, make up the most of it by any means.
No, I wouldn't have thought there's a huge amount of crossover there.
No. Well, that's probably why we have that lack of...
Exactly right. Yeah,
Mm.
I think there's enough... there'll be the odd one that gets pulled across shore, but generally, the experience looking from the property management side at the strata management side, as you've alluded to, it maybe isn't super positive. So there's not a huge draw there to go, oh, cool, I want to go and do that. And probably to some extent vice versa, unfortunately, as well. So it would be a logical place because there's an inherent knowledge base there, as it might not be complete, but it would make some sense to do that.
And a lot of synergies in what we
Yeah,
do,
yeah,
you know, the skill sets that overlap. I think
definitely.
as well, you know, strata is sort of a forgotten area of the property industry. So you've got real estate sales and you've got property management. It makes sense for strata management to be part of that kind of package, but it's kind of not. You know, there's some real estates that kind of do it a little bit, but really it's kind of stood alone as this separate area. But it's all part of the property industry. There's a lot of things that all go hand in hand, and really it should be part of the, you know, part of the package. But for some reason it kind of sits out there on its own, and the rest of real estate doesn't really understand it that well, and it kind of becomes like an us and them type thing. And it's I can see why it started off that way, but it's interesting that it kind of still, that's not really changing.
No, it's not sort of evolving really that way. What was I going to say with the strata management? Do you think that there's more agencies starting to do strata?
As in real estate agencies?
Yeah.
I could mount an argument both ways there.
Yeah.
I know of a lot of agencies that have previously been involved in strata that inevitably get out, and some of that's a long time ago, and some of that's more recently, as obviously it's becoming a bit harder to be in it probably. But then, probably there's always a section of the market that look at it as an opportunity and an extra revenue source potentially. Those are usually the ones that probably get in and then get back out again when they realise that it's not actually that easy to do.
It's not fun. Because from a business owner point of view, and I've had this discussion with a few agencies, that with sales and with property management, you can fluctuate with the market, but strata levies,
Very steady.
every property has to have an ownership, so you're going to have your strata levy. So it's a very, very stable option to implement, but we don't do it.
Yeah. I think... it absolutely, and not wanting to talk everyone into getting into it because, you know, more competition for us, but it certainly is, it doesn't have those market fluctuations like the rest of real estate does. So it is very stable and very steady, which is great. But equally, it's not something that, you know, there is a lot to it. It's not something that, which I think some real estate agents have probably done in the past, to think, oh, well, we do sales, we do property management, let's just tack on strata management as well, because that's a good, another, you know, consistent revenue stream, and pretty much the same as property management, right? So let's just do that too. But of course, it's so different and there's so much to it, and it's very hard to do it well. So if you're thinking about just doing it because the income side of it looks good, it's probably going to be fairly short-lived, because it's not actually easy to do it well, and there's a lot more to it. I mean, you're dealing with entirely different legislation, so it's not something you can think, oh, well, I know about property management, so I'll just, you know, do this as well on the side. You've got to really commit to it and treat it as though it is an entirely different area of experience and expertise. So, it'll be interesting to see, obviously, with reforms to the Strata Titles Act coming through earlier this year. I dare say that has probably encouraged some agencies to either decide we're really going to commit to strata, or if they've only kind of been dabbling in it, we won't bother and we'll sell out of it, because, you know, there are education requirements now, and, you know, an additional level of, I guess, governance and oversight of the industry. So for those who can't be bothered with that, I guess we'll be seeing them, you know, sell it off. But others who are willing to make that commitment, you know, it makes sense.
Definitely. I think there's also an element of the market is becoming, and I mean the client base in the market is becoming more sophisticated as strata becomes a bigger thing in Western Australia. So those businesses or agencies that commit to it and that see it as a specialist area, which it is, there's an opportunity there, but the ones that have been dabbling in it and have seen it primarily as an additional revenue source to see them through the ups and the downs, or the downs in the market, I think they'll be very quickly found out, because they typically haven't invested in the education side and performing it at a really high level. And as Cara says, with the education requirements, etc., coming in, the market is going to very quickly basically expose them as not operating at the level that's necessarily required. And that's purely an awareness thing. Like Cara says, you go back 20 or 30 years ago, you could quite conceivably be an agency that had a strata management string to your bow, because it was a much less sophisticated area. If you've got a driveway and a couple of garden beds, that's a whole different kettle of fish to 167 apartments. You've got effectively a commercial building and everything that goes along with that. That's a very different prospect. So the market's changing, and I think that will impact it as well. That brings opportunity, but it also brings, maybe people get out for the reason they go, it's a bit too hard now. So.
Well, let's talk about the perception of strata managers. And I...
How long you got?
I will let you know what a property manager could perceive a strata manager doing. And that is very much just the admin collecting levies. And then quite often we don't even think you guys do it. When I say you guys, I'm talking general strata managers. We don't even sometimes think that strata managers do a great job of invoicing levies, because they don't follow up the arrears and bits and pieces. So from our perception, we think that you just collect levies, invoice levies, and arrange insurance, and that's it. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, you've got a council of owners, so every time you want a quote, you just tell the council of owners to arrange the quote. So
that'd be nice.
That'd
be a dream.
That is just like the perception that, I guess we see quite often.
Do you tell your owners to arrange quotes?
No, unless you want, only if they want a fourth, fifth, or sixth quote. But I will always do 3 for them complimentary. Yeah. Actually, quite often I'd probably do more anyway. But anyway, that's the perception of us. That's what we think. So, tell me where we've got that wrong.
I'm gonna jump in before Cara here, because she'll give you a much better answer. But just quickly, that example of why you think of us that way correlates pretty well perfectly to the example we spoke about before, with a small little complex with a driveway and a garden bed, because that's pretty much all they would have had to do.
Yeah.
But as I say, it's evolved from there. Cara will give you a more full answer now, I'm sure.
So I'm correct when it's a small complex, or not?
No, still
not
to an
necessarily,
extent, but not. Yeah. I can see why that perception has been created over a long period of time, because the majority of the market still is, but certainly going back, was made up of smaller complexes. So for a lot of complexes, that would be the bulk of what they do, because there isn't much else to it necessarily.
Until something goes wrong. But your day-to-day experience, that's a large part of the role in smaller complexes. There's still more to it, but it's evolving as the market evolves.
And that's interesting, because I guess it's the same as from a property, managing properties. You've got your easy properties that you manage, which don't cause you any headache, and then you've got your more complex landlords and properties. So we focus on the easy ones, and I guess owners can come to us and say, I had one the other day where they say, you don't have to do much for my property, you're not doing much. Well, actually we do quite a lot in the back end, but there's also, I guess in fairness, there's other properties that take up all our time. So maybe a similar situation. And us property managers focus on those those little easy ones. So
I'll let Cara explain properly.
Look, I wish the job was that simple. We'd have a lot more time on our hands. And I mean, this is a fundamental issue with strata management. Unfortunately, the industry doesn't have a great reputation. When we tell people what we do, their response is either what's strata management, or it's launching off into a story about how much they hate their strata manager. They're literally the only 2 answers I ever get, which is so sad.
Yeah.
And so the way that property managers obviously perceive us is a very similar way that a lot of our clients perceive us, particularly the owners who aren't on the council of owners, who aren't that involved in the day-to-day. All they see from us might be, they get their levy notice once a quarter and they pay that, and they think, what am I paying all this money for? But But there is so much that goes in behind the scenes to manage these buildings, small or large. Often with the small ones, the rate of things happening is lower. So, you might have some small ones on your books that you only hear from once every few months or once every 6 months, which you kind of need to balance out those that are going through tough times and challenges where you're doing a lot of work on them. Even with the small ones, if all the building structures are common property and it might be a group of 4 villas, there can be, then they need their roof replaced. You've got to kind of coordinate all of that. Even just the inquiry that you get from owners, tenants, property managers, contractors, settlement agents. Like, there's so many people coming at us every day. One building that we manage, we looked at the other day, just on Monday, we had 50 emails just for that one building. Wow. For one building that we manage. And that can be, because someone's asked, I've got this levy I've just bought in, what's it for? Basic understanding that people don't have, or can I have a pet? I noticed there's a mark on the wall here. The lift door keeps jamming, the gate's not opening, someone's parked in my car bay.
This person's looked at me wrong.
This person was making a noise on the weekend. It's just the amount of inquiry is enormous, and no 2 days are the same. I mean, I've been in the industry 10 years now, and honestly, things still come up weekly that I've never had to deal with before, that just different variables, different stuff happens. And we're dealing with a large quantity of people in any one building. Say, in a large building, you've got 150 apartments, for example. You've got all the owners, you've got tenants for the ones that are renters, you've got property managers, contractors. On any one day, there's thousands of people that can be contacting you. And really, the building gets run, for a little Strata 101 lesson, I guess, the common property gets run by a council of owners who are volunteers, who usually don't know anything about running a building. Why would they? They've all got their own jobs and lives, and this is a little something, someone's got to do it, so they'll do it on the side. Our role is really to make everything happen, because they don't have the expertise or time often to do it. So they're the decision makers, and often, strata managers get a lot of flack for, this has been like that for 3 months and nothing's been done. Well, we have no authority to spend the money to do that. We need to get instruction from the council of owners. So everything that it takes to manage the complex, and like anything, they don't just sit there perfectly every day. Things go wrong. Mm-hmm. It's the nature of things. So sure, in a perfect world, if the building literally just sat there from the day it was built and worked perfectly all the time and nothing ever happened and people didn't misbehave and everyone parked where they were meant to and nothing ever broke down, then all we'd have to do would be issue the levy invoices and pay the insurance. But of course, that's not reality. The volume is actually enormous. And I think that's where, unfortunately, strata managers, they're in a high stress environment, as property managers are as well. I think we've got that in common. High volume of stuff to deal with. Usually it's problems that people want solved immediately. And so strata managers can slip into the trap of, whether consciously or unconsciously, approaching their dealings with people with, an abrupt or, sort of attitude, defensive attitude, which kind of makes them seem unhelpful. But often it's coming from, and of course we try not to be one of them, but often it's coming from a place of, I've literally received, 80 to 100 emails today and I need to just get through them, and I've got people on at me about this that needs to be done urgently, and I've got all these people to get back to, and that's the reality. And no one wants to pay strata management fees. No one wants to pay more than they need to for them. People are expected to manage a lot to make the business viable, and that means, people are pressed for time, and it's and the saddest part about it is that all that hard work goes into it just to keep things okay. And what a lot of people perceive you as doing is sitting back, just issuing a levy once a quarter and paying the insurance.
Yeah.
And actually you're just, you've got stuff coming at you all day, every day. It never stops.
I think the key thing missing from the two things you quoted there was the fact that everything outside of the private lot is managed by us. So everything that's common property is managed by the strata management. However, we've got to, like Cara said, we've got to do it on the actions of the council. So we've got no authority. So something comes up and it might be relatively simple and minor. Generally, there might be a scope where we can action certain things, but a lot of the time there's a process we've got to follow to get things done. So that then adds steps, it adds time, it adds more interaction into seemingly simple things. But if fundamentally people aren't understanding that, hang on, everything else you see in that building that's not your physical unit, someone has to manage that, and that's us. So that's the key bit that the PM side maybe is missing.
And I suppose if you compare it to property management, similar thing. If in a perfect world, all you guys would have to do would be collect rent and pay it to the landlord.
Are you saying that's what we
perfect
do?
world. That's all you do, right? All you do is sit there, have money come into your account and pay it out to someone else's account. That's
just a clearing.
literally all it is.
Yeah.
Let the bank do it.
Well, there's actually apps that actually can just do that.
Yeah, well, then there you go. Yeah. But then look at this. This is why there's still a role for property managers, because same in our role, if all you're doing were those basics, technology would have taken us over by now. Yeah. But you need the people, because stuff is going wrong all the time, and things have to be resolved and mediated and worked out and problem solved. And it's the same with you guys. If you never had, my shower head's leaking, or disputes between the tenant and the owner, and in that perfect world you wouldn't have much of a job either.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's think about how much can go wrong in an apartment. And then how much can go wrong through a whole building.
And I think this is a very, very good reality check, the way that you guys have talked about all those extra things, because it's exactly the same as property managers. Property manager in an ideal world collects the rent and arranges maintenance. You guys collect the rent and arrange maintenance, but we're all forgetting that maintenance side of things is massive, and those stupid inquiries are massive, and where's my rent paid to?
No such thing as a stupid inquiry. Sorry, just
customers always right.
Is that your automated email? Yeah. But we all sort of have that same, so very, very, very similar in our roles from that point of view. Except I would probably go as far as saying that a property manager probably has it a little bit easier with maintenance, because quite often they know the owner well enough to be able to sometimes just arrange the maintenance without getting all that extra approval. So that can sometimes be a little bit of an advantage for us than what you guys have got. Like, do you have authorised spend limits? Is that something that you have got?
We generally do. And honestly, the small routine stuff is not the problem.
Okay.
It's the scale of things can be expensive, and
the automated gate,
they can be big ticket items, and they can be, I'm sure you've dealt with your fair share of water ingress frustrations where it might be affecting an apartment, trying to find out where it's coming from, what the cause is, how to fix the cause. That might be a massive job to fix it. It can take months. So the nature of how big the issues can be, I guess is probably goes beyond largely what you'll deal with in property management. Maybe in a house, rather than apartment, there might be, the bigger ticket items. But some of these issues are complex, expensive, and we can't just go ahead and just get them fixed. Sometimes you're getting all kinds of consultants in it, and even they don't know how to fix it. Yeah. So it's I hope that as property managers see there's more to it.
I do feel a lot kinder towards you guys now. Okay. Inspecting the complex, is there a rule surrounding how often you should check, like in person, check and inspect a complex? What is best practice? My opinion is that there's a lot of strata managers that don't check the complex, and I think the ones that do maybe check it once a year. I don't know what's normal, what's reasonable. Yeah. What do you think?
It's an interesting one, particularly comparing with property management, because, of course, you guys are doing your inspections all the time. And I just did inverted commas there, which you can't see, air quotes on the podcast, because you obviously call them, property inspections, and that's all very acceptable. In strata management, we need to be very careful not to inspect the property. Because our PI insurance actually doesn't cover us to carry out inspections largely because there are so many potential risks and maintenance issues that we're not qualified to pick up, and they can have serious consequences. So we need to be careful not to be seen to be someone who will go and do a property condition report of the common areas, because it's just not our area of expertise. And the scope for missing something important that could be a serious hazard is huge. So there's kind of two parts to it. There's the inspect side, which I would never say we inspect the building. I would never call it that. We will attend, and we like to be familiar with the buildings that we manage. So we will attend the site and we'll, do a walk around with the council of owners or whoever, caretaker, whatever the case may be, to familiarise ourselves and make sure we're clear on, what certain priorities are and that sort of thing. But we'll never call it an inspection, and we certainly won't offer to do routine inspections. We will. I think it's great for owners, and again, this is something that they need to authorise and be willing to pay for, but to actually engage a qualified, building consultant, building inspector to attend routinely and comment on the condition of the property and alert them to any potential hazards and things like that. That's a great thing that owners should do. A lot of them don't. A lot of them don't want to pay for it. In other cases, the owners are very active and they take on that role and they're comfortable that they'll flag anything that needs to be flagged. So I can actually really understand from a property manager's point of view, it must seem really strange because you guys do property inspections regularly,
and we have to look at the risks in a property. That's our job. So it's sort of unfair that we have to do that. But it's
actually strange, and for us, it's completely different. And so there's no legislative requirement to go to the complex. So strata managers are quite within their rights to say no. Our role is back office. And if the property needs to be inspected, then the owners arrange someone qualified to do that. They're quite within their rights to do that. I think it's becoming more common where strata managers will make an effort to go at least once a year or go when there's an issue occurring to, sort of familiarise themselves for their own knowledge.
But they're attending and they're not identifying risks and inspecting.
I think it comes down to there's a fundamental difference there. Like you say, you're required to perform inspections and to produce property condition reports that are then able to be acted upon. That's very different in the strata side of things. I think it's and like Cara says, it's something that we certainly want to do and do is attend with council of owners and understand what the issues might be that are being highlighted either by the owners or by the council of owners, and then facilitate the necessary outcomes. It's not our role, for all the reasons Cara's already mentioned, to point out what the problems are. But once a problem is identified, sure, we can go on site, we can have a look. We're attending, as Cara says, we're part of that process, but our job is to facilitate the necessary outcomes. So whether that's engaging an external consultant, whether that's engaging contractors to quote and then perform the maintenance or the repairs that are required, that part's us. But physically going and identifying the risk and producing a report accordingly, no. That's a key, I guess, misnomer or misunderstanding, that's coming across from one industry to the other.
That's so interesting.
Also, as well, I think, it's been a part of property management forever. It's factored into your business model that you need the resources for those inspections to be done. With Strata, that's not the case. So Strata managers, if they were visiting all their complexes regularly, the entire business model would have to change. Fees would have to go up quite a lot. Also, it's just not structured that way because that's never been the case. But there's not a whole heap of value to be gained from adding that into the scope.
No.
In my view, they're better off getting a building consultant to go out there once a quarter and give them a report. They're going to get a much better report than I could do, particularly when the common areas can be very extensive and the risks associated with it can be extensive. So it is interesting, and I can understand why that is like a point of confusion for a lot of people.
This is great, because now when I've got my staff that are having their frustrations, then literally the other day someone said, why doesn't the strata manager get off their bum and go inspect it? Now I can turn around and say, well, actually, they don't need to because of their insurance, and this is a problem, and this is what they do. And I can educate them, but unless we talk about it, no one knows.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's probably in that scenario that it's incumbent on the council or the owners to report it to the council of owners, and then the council of owners to request we can attend with them potentially. But like Cara says, not an enormous amount of value in us doing that, because we're not engineers, we're not building consultants. So, but they've got to identify what the problem is and then say, okay, this is what it is. Can you help us solve it? Yeah, we can help you solve it, but it's not our job to point it out. So, it's a difference. And like Cara says, it's a bit unusual if you look at it objectively as to why one side has to do that and you guys have to perform that task and it's legislated, and why the other doesn't. But
I'd say it has something to do. I mean, the laws are entirely separate, I guess, but I suppose it would have something to do with the extent of the scope, you know, the liability you're opening yourself up to across a whole building.
As opposed to one house.
As opposed to one house
is,
and a building with a lot of people traffic coming through. It's a much different scale. And also, again, going back to the business model, strata managers manage things all over WA. You know, real estate tends to focus on this as our area. So you can duck out to that property and that property because you're not driving. You know, we manage buildings in Karratha. Yeah. We're not going to go there to inspect something. And the industry.
I'm sure if you had something in Broome, you'd go up and inspect regularly.
Yeah.
Sure. Water leak on your ceiling, I'll be there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, when it suits us and we can get a holiday out of it, sure, we'll inspect.
Correct, that's right. Definitely. All right, next one is strata levies. Now, strata levy arrears, from a property manager's point of view, you invoice the strata levy. Generally, I can't tell you someone who's ever followed up on the levies or who, if they've not been paid on time, phoned the owner, just done a general reminder. Instead, you wait till the next lot of levies is due and you slap on 15% interest. So,
wow.
That's what I see. Tell me about that.
I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier. I'm going to give it a short answer and then Cara will elaborate on it. Lots of things in how you describe that aren't necessarily should be happening that way or correct. But the bit I'll point out is it's a bit the same thing. You get a late payment with rent. You've got one tenant to call, and you know that's a relatively simple process. So you can physically pick up the phone and follow that out. If you take that and extrapolate it out over strata levies, and the volume of people at a particular given date, because they all fall due on the same date, obviously within a building. So if you've got 100 apartments and there might be 30 that are a week overdue, then you start thinking about the time that's involved from a business model point of view to physically pick up the phone and ring 30 owners. That's just one building. But a lot of quarters are similar. So a lot of buildings have their quarters fall due on the same date. So if you've got 3 buildings or 4 buildings that all their levies fall due on the 1st of October, and all of a sudden 2 weeks later there's 80 or there's 90 that are overdue, it very quickly becomes virtually impossible to physically pick up the phone and follow that up. But there should be an arrears process in place, which is where I'll hand over to Cara and she'll give you a much better explanation.
Okay.
Everything Alex said is right. I'm amazed that you're not getting reminders all you're getting is the next levy with interest whacked on it. That surprises me, I must say, because I would think that I would have thought that all strata managers, but I would certainly think that most have a process in place, which in this day and age of technology can be fairly automated for the most part, where reminders get issued and follow-up, notices get issued before things get serious, and certainly before the next quarter's due. We certainly do that. We'll send multiple reminders electronically before it gets, sort of to a serious point. And then we will usually, when it gets to the point, so we kind of send out all of our reminders within the first 30 days, and there's no interest during that first 30 days as well, which has now gone down to 11% rather than 15%, which has legislated the interest rate. So we don't set that either. Often people say, 15%, you're charging me 15% interest. We're not charging it. I wish I was getting it, but it's not paid to us. It's actually now 11%. But we have our clients at each AGM actually accept their own debt recovery procedure. So we give what we recommend, and in 99% of cases, they accept that. And that outlines how the process is going to work. So they're going to get their levy notice, 30 days in advance. They're going to get a reminder 7 days, 14 days, 21 days after it's overdue. At the 28-day mark, they'll get a final notice saying that it's overdue and further action will be taken if we don't hear from them. At that point, if it remains overdue, we will endeavour to contact whoever's responsible by any means of communication we've got. So if we've got a phone number, we will try to call it, because, of course, for us, the next step is then going through the debt recovery process, which at that point, I would rather try and get someone on the phone and get it sorted out before going to that trouble. So, we certainly wouldn't be calling everyone in the earlier stages, but before it kind of starts getting serious, we will try and call people if we've got their phone numbers. Sometimes we don't. If there's an agent, obviously, of course, we can get in touch with you. So that should be followed. There's no rules around it. Could say, you could send no reminders at all, just let the interest rack up, let them sit in arrears. There's no rule against that. Obviously, that doesn't really serve anyone, and I'm surprised anybody's doing that.
Yeah.
So we try to harass people with reminders first, and then if it's still not going anywhere, then we will give a phone call, try to get in touch with them before we kind of go to the next steps. And that, in our view, should happen well before the next quarter falls due, because at that point you're doubling the debt then, and it becomes a bigger problem, and it can get out of control very quickly if you're not keeping on top of it, and then suddenly you've got several thousands of dollars outstanding by an owner who's then struggling to get back on top of it. So I'm shocked that
Really?
that's not your experience.
Yeah,
more often. I would have thought 90% of strata managers would follow a similar process.
I wonder whether there's an element of, if you asked the other people that you're dealing with and said, what's your debt recovery process? Firstly, I would assume they'll give you an answer, and they'll say, our process is we send a reminder at 14 and 28 days and whatever it is. But if you're then not getting that reminder, like, I just wonder where that balance is. Is it they have a process, they're just not following it for a myriad of potential reasons, and I think that's most likely the outcome, or whether they physically don't have the processes in place. Like Cara says, it's a no-brainer in my opinion that the owners, it's their building. Ultimately, they're the ones that are going to be carrying the debt for an owner that's not paying their levies. So they should be in control of what that recovery process looks like, which is why we table it at every AGM and say, hey, this is the process. If you want to change it, no problems. This is what we suggest. And then it's up to us, again, to facilitate it and to make sure it happens. But the fact that it's there, it's clearly outlined, this is their process, that effectively becomes a KPI, because then it can be tracked back. Well, we've got this levy overdue. Where are the reminders? Did they go out? And then it's very easy to see if that's being followed or not. But reiterating Cara, I'd be surprised if they're not at least having a process in place.
Well, their process in place is issuing the next quarterly levy.
That would be easier, in fairness.
I think in this day and age of technology as well, it's kind of like, it's pretty simple. It's such a simple thing to do. But I also wouldn't be surprised if in some cases there's a little bit of probably, for want of a better phrase, old school strata manager mentality that, it's your responsibility to pay it. The levies are approved at the AGM. You know what they are. You know when they're due. You get one invoice. You sort it out. Why is it on me to spend my time chasing you up and making sure you pay it? There would be, I'm sure you would speak to some people that would take that approach, and some people in the industry that wouldn't agree with ours and would think that your problem, not mine. From our point of view, it's always a case of looking for what outcome do we actually want? What outcome does everyone want that's going to save us all time? For me, that is, send out your automated reminders, try and get the person to pay if you can before it gets to the point of having to go legal and go through that whole process.
There's no real positive outcome there.
From my point of view, it's in our best interest to to be more on top of it as well. It saves everyone time and trouble. So, but I wouldn't be surprised if some people didn't agree with that approach.
And I get the mentality of, because I'm the first one to say, you know what, you're adults, pay your bills on time. Yeah. You know, the bank doesn't give you a reminder type thing for your mortgage. But I guess it's not for the reminders, not necessarily for owners that just are lazy and aren't paying. It's sort of sometimes more for property managers who receive lots of emails, or you know, maybe there's one that hasn't been received, maybe it went to junk mail, and I guess it's sort of more the innocent stuff.
Absolutely.
Things get missed.
100%.
Things
Or
get
the people
missed.
are away, or there's a myriad of reasons, which is why we have that process in place. And you know, we go out of our way in those notices to not be too heavy-handed, and we talk about this actually when we talk about the process at the AGM. Is, you know, the ideal scenario is we understand things happen. Like Kara's saying, things get missed, human error, it goes to junk mail, people are on holidays, whatever it might be. So the assumption on our behalf is that it's just an innocent mistake, and hence you get a couple of reminders and it's a bit of a free kick and say, hey, no worries, let's sort it out. But then if you just get nothing back, that's when the rest of the process has to be there to kick in. But if the process in place is just say nothing, it's their responsibility and wait until the next quarter, it's pretty easy to see why people have a bad impression of strata managers. Yeah. Because it's like, oh, hang on, mate, I was overseas, I didn't realise, or, you know, that email's no longer active, or whatever it might be, and now you've just slapped me with this, you know, it's not you doing it, but quickly people get frustrated, and I look at that and go, well, you could have pretty easily avoided that situation if you just looked at it from the other side's point of view and worked out what's the outcome we're trying to achieve and what's in the best interest of everyone, and let's put that in place.
And it's not necessarily just about who's technically responsible. You know, in that case, you could say, well, you should have updated your email address with us, or you should have known your levy was going to due when you went on holiday. It's not about that for me. It's, you know, as much as it often gets forgotten, we're a service industry. We're here to provide 100%. A service to clients who are paying for it. And if part of that service is, you know, we'll help you make sure you get your levies paid, I think that's, you know, that's better off for everyone.
I don't see a downside there.
That's good for us as well as them, and why not, you know?
Yeah.
That's how
I've got one privately managed strata in the area, and they like to just, at the AGM, they do the advisor levies for the whole year, but they do not do invoices. But we just have to record in our diaries, like when it's due, like really old school. Yeah. But there's actually still a lot of people that are doing that, and we've got to record it. We've got to make sure they've got funds, you know, like that we hold over, and painful. Okay, so another property manager has said to me that when they have inquired about levies maybe that are overdue, or have a question on their account, that they're just getting the ledger sent to them, and basically saying, the strata manager saying to the property manager, here's the ledger, you figure it out. You figure it out. Yeah. And that's frustrating from the property manager's side, because there's no explanation there. And I guess a lot of property managers don't have that trust accounting background, so they look at a ledger and they don't know what they're looking at. So provide a comment on that.
I think that comes back to probably what we covered a moment ago, which is essentially just looking at it from the other side's perspective, and having a bit of understanding and a bit of awareness, and in sort of seeing where you guys are coming from, rather than taking the typical, dare I say it, traditional approach, which is not my problem, you figure it out, hence you just get a PDF of a ledger or a screenshot of a ledger. That is sometimes
very difficult to understand. Even I struggle with them sometimes.
And there's nothing with it. It's just, you know, again, maybe it's just our perspective, but I look at that and I go, you're creating a no-win situation. You're almost inviting conflict or frustration there, because...
Or at least a second email.
Yeah, exactly. You're adding time.
I don't understand.
Yeah. Can you know, for the sake of spending an extra, you know, couple of minutes up front and just saying, here's the ledger, you know, here's ABC reasons why you've got this arrears notice. And then if there's a further question, just having the attitude of, you know, hey, not everyone's going to understand everything first time. That person might be new. There's a myriad of reasons as to why there might be a query there, but to me, it's attitude based, as opposed to I'm ticking the box, which is technically this is all I have to provide you, and that's all I'm going to give you. And that's an approach that has maybe been there for a while for certain elements of the industry. But that's certainly not how we look at it. We look at it as, you know, no different to if an owner asked that question. Actually, I was going to say we'd never do that to an owner, and we wouldn't, but a lot of
People
owners
would
would
do
say
the
that's
same.
that's the exact response they've had. So,
yeah.
but yeah, for me, it just comes down to attitude. There's no one that's going to win out of taking that approach, in my opinion. And it's a bit short-sighted. Like Cara says, sure, you flick that off and you go, well, that's off my desk now, but it's just going to bounce straight back to you, and then it's going to take you longer to deal with it the second time, and and then everyone's on the back foot, and I just think that's just a poor attitude.
Yeah,
basically.
I think again, if we all had a lot more time on our hands, speaking not from my point of view necessarily, but generally, those sorts of things may not happen so much. But from a strata manager's point of view, who, like I said, has 100 emails in their inbox, they're just trying to get them off their desk, and no doubt there would be an element there of, well, not my problem. You guys pay the levies. Keep on top of where you're at with it. Why do I have to explain this to you? But I think this is and that sort of attitude, I think, can go both ways. We can get it from property managers, and it goes both ways. And something Alex and I were talking about on the way here was that it's a shame that it's like that, because really strata managers and property managers have so many things in common and are dealing with many of the same stresses and challenges, and we should be a support for each other and work in partnership, rather than it being an us and them, or getting irritated by the other because they don't understand, or they haven't, they're not doing their job, whatever you perceive to be the case. Take the time to, rather than seeing it as though, well, I'm not going to waste my time explaining this to you, and I technically don't have to, here's the ledger. I would see that as I'm happy to help you understand, like, let's work together, have that professional courtesy, I think.
Well,
help each other out. And I would want the same in return.
Yeah,
if I've
exactly.
then got a query for a property manager on something that's their area of expertise and not mine,
Yeah.
I would like the favour return to be like, can you help me understand it? Take 2 minutes of your time and help me understand it. At that, I hope that we can get to a point, and we work with a lot of great property managers, you being one of them, and we have those good relationships, and I think that needs to filter through the whole industry.
Yeah.
We should be helping each other, not making things harder for each other or getting annoyed at each other.
Even property manager to property manager, we have our
Yeah.
frustrations.
Yeah.
We've got the difficult ones that are a pain to deal with. And
I think the interesting thing about that, though, is I made the comment about it being a short-sighted approach. There's a flow-on effect if we take that 5 minutes up front to go, like I said, that person might be new, they might not know any better. But if we spend that little bit of time up front and say, hey, here's the reasons why, say cheese, then that's not going to make any sense when people are just listening to the audio. They're just taking a photo.
No. Every time I take photos, people say the same thing.
But if we spend that little bit of time up front, that I look at it and go, well, hopefully that means, let's say it's you and I have the conversation. Next time an issue like that comes up within the office, I don't get involved because you help the other person. Oh, I've dealt with that. We've had this explained. Here's the reasons why. So there's a flow-on effect and it filters down the chain. But, yeah, like Cara says, unfortunately that probably hasn't been the attitude from both sides historically, but hopefully we can change that.
We are going to change that.
Everyone listen to this podcast.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm finding it absolutely fascinating. And I mean, I've been doing real estate for 20 years and I have never really had the opportunity to actually sit with strata managers to hear your side. But I have to point out, you guys do clearly do things a lot different than a lot of other people. And I mean, this is by no means sponsored, but you guys are a standout with it all. Another pet hate that a property manager's given me, that when an AGM notice has been issued, a lot of strata managers just put the strata plan number and not the address of the complex.
I've been guilty of that, sorry.
So how does that happen and why do you guys do it?
Yeah, so I must say, this has come up a couple of times recently. Every time I'm like, whoops, sorry, I forget. We deal in the way that we identify buildings is the name of the strata company or the name of the strata scheme, which often that's a building name, especially with newer, bigger buildings, they'll usually have a name.
So hold on. So you're saying you're in the office and you're talking about a property and you'd go, oh yeah, strata plan 9645.
Not the strata plan number. We'll refer to the building name. So say the building name is, we're at Crib Creative. Say the building name's Crib Creative. We'll refer to it as that and the strata plan number.
Okay.
So that's our sort of identifying factor rather than the address necessarily. Some strata schemes, the name of the scheme is the address, and that makes it easier. But particularly in the newer developments that you're seeing now, they usually will have a name. You know, developers like to put a cool name on it, and that's the actual legal terminology that we use to identify that building or that strata scheme. It's the actual name that's registered on the strata plan. So when we're sending out notices of AGMs particularly or whatever, our default position is the name of the strata company, the name of the strata scheme as it's registered on the strata plan.
It has to be.
And the strata plan number. Often that doesn't include the address anywhere. And honestly, yeah, like I said, I've been guilty of it a few times myself, and I've learned from property managers coming back and saying, sorry, no idea what building this is, what's the address? Yeah. And from our point of view, we're like, don't you guys have the name of the building in your system?
No.
Don't you have the name? No. See? So
yeah.
Now we're getting into the habit of adding the address at the end as well.
Because that's going to save you a lot of emails.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've learned from the hard way that pop the address in there as well.
Because we are just address based.
Yeah.
Like not even the strata plan number. Like there's not really even the provision in our software. So if you could kindly make an effort to do that in future, it would be appreciated.
I have been, but I will say I've been guilty of it as well. So sorry, everyone. And I can see why that happens probably on a large scale, because we are so used to dealing in that terminology, and you don't need to use the address because that's not our reference point. So yes.
So we're going to work on that.
Yeah, we are going to work on that.
Excellent. Now, what other questions did I have? If there's a property manager, this is now, I think we've sort of finished the major questions or frustrations, but if you were a property manager and you were wanting to get into strata management as a progression, it's not necessarily saying that strata management is like a promotion as such, but just as a progression in career, how do people do that?
Pretty easily. I mean, firstly, I would take some time to learn a little bit more about it to make sure it's something that you were definitely interested in. There's, of course, a lot of synergies like we've already discussed, but they're very different roles at the same time. I think it would be great for strata management to get more property managers into it because they will naturally already have the right sort of skill set, I think. But it's important that they kind of, I guess, know a bit more about what it actually involves and what they're getting into. So if they're the property managers that think all we do is sit back and issue levies once a quarter and pay insurance, probably don't get into it for that reason. But at this point in time, the changes to the strata titles legislation from earlier this year have implemented an education requirement, but there is a transition period in getting that done.
So there's a course, you mean?
There is. Yeah. There's a Cert 4 in Strata Community Management, which actually, if you've got real estate credentials, you actually need to get only a few modules. I can't remember the exact number.
What did you call it?
It's the Cert 4 in Strata Community Management.
And is that something that is done at REWA or TAFE?
Just TAFE. North Metro TAFE does it, and it's work-based learning. REWA too.
I think I might have seen an email from REWA the other day, actually.
I wouldn't be surprised if REWA. I expected REWA would start doing it. See, I don't know if they already have.
Because I like the idea of my property managers to do that course for their own personal knowledge. I think it'd be beneficial.
Yeah.
I think my to come back to your question and to add on to what Kyra's saying, the first thing I would encourage people if they're thinking of coming across would be go and get a really good understanding of the difference between common property and private property, because that's probably the biggest single misunderstanding, and that harks back to everything that we've said around, well, what do you guys actually do? If you get a really clear picture in your head of, well, what is common property, and therefore that's, we're essentially responsible for managing that on behalf of the owners, etc.
And particularly more the internal pipe work and,
all
inside.
That. Yeah. So get a really clear understanding of, in property management, these are your core areas. This is what you're responsible for. Get a clear picture of what that means in strata, and then think about, what do I enjoy about my role in property management? What do I hate about my role in property management? What am I looking to gain or achieve from, why am I wanting to go across? And then chat with people in the industry. So, obviously go and have a coffee with someone or give one of us a call, and we'll certainly obviously always be available for that. But the first things I'd be asking them is exactly what I said. Well, why are you thinking of coming across? What do you enjoy about what you do now?
So
what
if
don't
I
you?
said, Alex, because I don't want to deal with, crap anymore, and then you would say, well, Ash,
I'd say
You're
stay where
just-
you are. You're
Yeah,
going to
still-
deal with less. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So, but that gets back to that
Yeah.
same thing. Is you've got to have an understanding of where you're at now and what you like and what you don't like. But if you don't have a really clear picture, like Cara said, of what is actually involved in the strata side, people can very quickly get a rude shock there and go, well, okay.
Yeah.
The Cert 4 has been great for
Yeah.
the industry because, prior to that, there was no formal education in strata. So I'm sure it's still, it's fairly new and it could certainly be improved, which will happen with time. But absolutely, it's there and it's available. So it's a great place to start. Even you don't have to even do the whole Cert 4. You can pick out some key modules, and that the Act will require, I think it's 8 modules to be a strata manager moving forward.
So I could be I could do the Cert 4 and I could be a strata manager.
Yeah. Up until now,
Yes.
you didn't even have to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I know that.
Yeah.
Or you just, in terms of wanting to come across, just read the Strata Titles Act. And you'd be positioned
I've got
very
better
well.
things
It's
to do.
only,
I've got better
it's
things to
only
do.
about 400 odd pages now.
Well, I have a friend who probably would read that, and then every time I want to know something specific, I generally call her up and say,
That's the friend you want.
where would
Yeah.
I find this? And she can just quote it. I was
Yeah.
like, sweet, thank
So
you.
why would you read it when you've got someone like
Yeah,
that
exactly.
that can just give you the concise version when you need it?
Absolutely, absolutely. But I guess if you were a property manager and you sort of said, I just want to do something different. I love real estate. I love property management generally, but I'm just getting a little bit tired of it. Then strata management would probably be
could absolutely
just something
be.
different.
Yep,
For sure.
absolutely.
As long as
Yeah.
it's for the right
There's heaps of
reason.
parallels, like Cara says. There's
Heaps
It's
of parallels,
huge.
but so many differences where
Yeah.
it would be, if someone's a bit tired of the property management thing, they'd absolutely find that they get a lot of new challenges out of
it's a
strata
very
management.
dynamic area.
You're chairing meetings,
More
you're-
budget control.
yeah,
and
budget
things.
control, the
Yeah.
financial control, the governance side of things, working with so many different owners to help try and get them to a shared sort of goal and outcome, navigating all the different personalities and that sort of stuff. So yeah, there's a whole lot of new challenges and good things to come from it if that's how they're feeling. And I think it would be a natural fit. I think a lot of property managers who are doing well in property management would probably do very well in strata as well.
Excellent. And just to finish off, what do I want to finish on? Actually, there's 2 things to finish on. First one, a property management setup can be like pod or portfolio based. Is a strata manager the same? Like, do you sort of all each have like so many properties you look after and you do everything from start to finish? Or do you set yourself up with pods where you've got, Alex deals with this part of the complex and then Cara deals with that? Like, how do you set yourself up? And what would be an average number of lots to look after per person?
I'll answer the second part first. Can't answer that.
Yeah.
The average one. And again, I'll do what I've done before. I'll give you a short answer, and Cara will give you a better one. Traditionally, it's been the strata manager typically does pretty well all of it, and then the business might have account support and administration support that sits underneath the strata managers. But yeah, they would largely be responsible from pretty well everything from start to finish. There's definitely arguments to be made for siloing it or podding it, as you call it, which may be a bit of a friendlier term than silo, because they're very different needs. So, someone who's handling all of the governance and the administration and the financials typically might have a pretty different skill set to someone who's handling all of the maintenance. So there's definitely arguments for going both ways, but traditionally I would think it's been the strata manager typically does pretty well everything.
With admin and account support.
Yeah, with a bit of support underneath. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely the whole idea of specialisation is becoming more prevalent, I think. I think people on the East Coast are further down that track than we are here, but I think that's definitely where the shift is going. There's still a lot of strata managers out there who think, no, it's better if the strata manager is across every single thing that happens and, oversees it all and has the knowledge of it all and is involved in it all, because then they know exactly what's going on, which there's benefits to that. But we are certainly more going down the line of the specialisation approach, because there are so many different elements to it. it's a bit disjointed to be getting into all of those on any particular building, whereas having someone, for example, specialising in maintenance, they develop really good knowledge on that side of things, on buildings, how they work, the maintenance requirements, and their focus is on that across the whole portfolio for the business. And then the strata manager still has oversight. They're essentially the relationship manager that everything feeds back up to, but you've got those specialised areas sort of sitting under that. That's doing the legwork, doing the running around, doing the time-consuming stuff, getting it done, and then reporting back to the strata manager, at a higher level sort of thing. So I think that's probably more where it's heading. But at the moment, I'd say it's generally a mixture of both. And in a lot of cases, the strata manager's still just kind of doing everything. And in some cases, not even with admin support, even doing the admin stuff themselves as well. Yeah. And in terms of your second question with the standard number of lots per portfolio, that's just such a hard thing. Hard thing to say. I'd say typically ballpark, it's probably been, between sort of 600 lots with no real admin support to 1,000 lots with admin support, depending how much that support is, or even more if you've got full-time assistant, or depending how the business is structured. But the hard thing is every building's so different. 100 lots over here can be completely different to 100 lots over there. So from our point of view, we structure our portfolios more based on management fees it brings in, because obviously if a building's harder work, we'll charge more for it. So we structure it more on dollar value rather than the size of the building, because it's unfair, I think, to say to someone, you manage this 100-lot building and you manage that one. This one we're charging more because we know they're way more work. This one we're charging less because they're really quiet. They're two completely different, set of demands. So that's how we're trying to look at it, because it's a really hard thing to get that perfect number. I don't think it exists. I try to do the same. Like my portfolios, I do on a financial position as well. And I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't tell a property manager how many properties they manage, because as soon as they've got that number in their head, they sort of think, I can only manage this many, or 100 or 150 or whatever. But if they don't know how many properties they look after, from a business point of view, and people will sort of say, well, it's not all about money. It's not all about money, but it still has to be a profitable business. So I look at the portfolio and say, well, this portfolio brings in this much money per month. Therefore, this is, what a wage is, and this is what, profit and expenses. And I try to look at it that way as well.
Yeah, it's got to be viable. It's got to be manageable. Correct. You've got to be able to deliver the outcomes that are expected from the customer point of view. And then that's got to be done in a manageable and a viable way for the business. So like Cara says, and like you're saying there, certain complexes and certain buildings will be more work. It's not a reflection on the people necessarily. It just could be there's more stuff going on in that building. So it needs to be looked at in that context. There's no point, obviously, trying to cram more buildings and more lots in, which is typically how a lot of businesses have approached it in the past, and overloading a strata manager, because all that happens is everyone suffers. They're overworked, they're frustrated, they're upset, they have bad relationships with other industries, and then customers suffer as well. And it creates sort of a downward spiral. So I think it's incumbent on us as business owners to look at portfolios and look at buildings and get an understanding up front and work out whether it's it's going to be a valuable relationship both ways, and then structure it accordingly.
Beautiful. Well, it has been lovely having you both on. It's been an absolute eye-opener, and I really do hope that this has been really beneficial for property managers and strata managers, and just building that gap a little bit, which has been super helpful for me. So I'm sure it's going to be super helpful for everybody else as well. And really, there is completely... all I'm taking from this is that we're very much complete the same, couple of different clients, but it's ultimately the same thing. So, us property managers will try and be a little bit more gentle.
Cut each other some slack. Give each other a break.
We're all human.
Have some understanding.
Be a bit nicer to each other.
Help each other out. All happy.
If strata managers are nicer to us, we'll probably be nicer to them.
Exactly.
But it's a big revolving cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, so, absolutely.
I think this has been very helpful.
It doesn't have to be negative or hard. It can be lovely, like this chat. It can be all good and positive.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.